Welcome to episode 19 of Unscripted Let's Talk. Today, I have a special treat. A friend of mine that goes way, way back, who is a private investigator, and she lives in Wisconsin. She owns her own private investigation firm, and she has agreed to sit down with me today to talk about some of the things she does. Now, she has just that kind of job that we all think about. Whoa, that's got to be exciting. It's really thrilling, and I don't know that she wears any kind of special hat or outfit when she investigates, but I guess we'll find out. So today we have Deb Bursick with us. Hello, Deb.
Hello, Mary.
And Deb is talking to us from her home in Wisconsin, actually probably from her, are you in your office or at your home or your home?
I'm in my office.
Okay, she's talking to us from her office, which is in your home, right? At this one that you're speaking from. You have other offices, I know. And she just told me a little bit ago that if her dog starts to bark, she might have to go let her dog out. But, we'll accommodate that. So Deb does criminal investigations, which include, but she also does investigations including personal injury, slander, civil rights investigations. How would you describe? Give us a little description, Deb, of what you do.
Okay, I do criminal defense cases and civil litigation primarily, 99%. And so what that entails is criminal defense. I have a defense attorney will call me and hire me for a case that they have, and so it's a variety of things. It can range from anything from burglary to sexual assault and theft and just a variety of things. And then I do a lot of civil litigation, which includes a lot of personal injuries, which can be of course, car accidents are the most popular, but there's, private liability type cases, there's medical malpractice, and I get involved in libel, slander things, civil rights things, and contract disputes. It's just a whole variety of cases.
That's just really interesting. I've so enjoyed listening to Deb over the years when she just talks about the process of what she does. And that's why I am so glad that you're here, Deb, to just let people in on it. So how does somebody
thank you.
Yeah. How does someone become a private investigator? How did you decide to do this? I mean, you can't go and major in private investigation. How do you become a private investigator?
Well, that's a good question. And I, of course, didn't, start out thinking, I'm going to be a private investigator, because it's not like you said, you can't major in it, and there's quite frankly not that many of us around. But I got into it. I just started when I was in graduate school, and I'm just going to do, I had a business bachelor's degree, and I thought I'm going to do something fun. And I looked through the curriculum or the choices of majors, and I thought I'm going to do criminal justice. And so I got my master's in criminal justice because that just interested me. And I actually specialized in a white-collar crime emphasis during my master's degree, and that's kind of what I did my thesis on. And so from there, it just kind of naturally blossomed into a good job was, I'm going to start working for a law firm and start working for lawyers who are doing this kind of work. And so I just started doing that. And after about 10 to 12 years, I started my own firm thinking, I needed more than what I could just get in the law firm, and I wanted my own business and where I could kind of control my own caseload. And I started my own business and marketed to attorneys and have enjoyed it and loved it, and it is my passion.
Mm-hmm. So when you first started out, what were you hired as? Were you hired as an investigator when you first began?
Well, it's always a blurry line. I mean, I was hired as a paralegal, but the work I always worked in litigation. And when you work in litigation, you're always doing some investigation. And so there's not like clear definitions, what does a lawyer do versus what does a paralegal do versus what does an investigator do? It's kind of blurred. So there are some lawyers that do some investigative work. There are some paralegals that do some investigative work. There are, it's a blurred line, but I mean, where it's clear is in the law. A paralegal and investigator cannot, represent somebody in court. And I mean, there are some specific things lawyers have to do those things. They have to argue their case. They have to be the advocate for the client. But there are, in building the case, there's no, set rules other than, attorneys have to be careful that they don't become a witness. And so in their own case, and so that's why they hire the investigator to do that. So if there's things that have to be testified on, the investigator has to do that. You can't have the lawyer be a witness in their own case.
Oh, so do you end up testifying sometimes as the investigator in the case? Oh.
Yeah, on occasion. Yeah.
Okay.
On occasion. Yeah.
All right. So it's.
Yeah, and it doesn't happen often, but it happens on occasion where, I've done something or a witness has testified contrary to what they told me or something like that. That's the type of case where I would be called to testify.
Okay, well that makes sense. Somebody told you one thing and you take the stand and say, no, that is not what they told me. Yes. Okay, so you might start out as a paralegal, but what happened for you is that your investigative skills became obvious fairly quickly, and you began to do more and more investigation. And after a while, there you were working for different attorneys, hired in whatever their capacity was. And it makes so much sense to me that you said, what am I doing? I'm just going to go work for myself and start my own firm. And then I will sell my time to them. Okay. So here's a question I know that everybody is thinking. Do you carry a gun?
Regularly.
I know you do.
Some of my friends that you pack and eat.
Do you pack heat, Deb?
There are some private investigators that do carry a gun. I do not. I try just to be careful of the situations that I'm in. If I'm uncomfortable in any way, I just get out. And, I try and, meet people, in public places if I have to, do an interview or, meet at, somebody's office or something like that. I typically try not to go into, people's homes unless I'm feeling very comfortable with that situation. And then I would let somebody know where I'm going if that's the case, that, I'm going into this person's home or whatever. But I just try to be careful. And I do have pepper spray in my purse. But that's as much as I would carry.
Okay. So the important thing, it sounds like, is that when you go somewhere where you're not certain, you let someone know where you're going to be.
Yes.
Yeah, that sounds really good.
Yeah.
So give us a sense, although you already have, you've given us a sense of the range of things that you do. Tell us a story. Give us an example of one of the cases that you've worked with.
Well, there's so many. I mean, I've got so many cases going on all the time. Like your typical car accident. I'll gather the records, which in and of itself is a skill, because records are kept differently by different municipalities, even in the same state. And so I will gather records. I will talk to witnesses. I will go to the scene and take pictures. I will track people down that, I'm skilled at finding witnesses that are sometimes difficult to locate.
How do you do that? I mean, how do you do that?
Yeah, it takes a lot of research. It takes a lot of research, and it always depends kind of on the particular, scenario. But for example, I found out, not too long ago, I needed to find a person I'll just use the name Julie, and I knew she worked at a particular store, but there were several of these stores around town, and I was like, how am I going to find her? And so I actually just started calling a couple stores asking, and they're like, oh no, she's at the East Side today. I'm like, oh, thank you. And then I made an appearance at the East Side store.
See, now that makes you sound like someone on TV, Deb. But that makes sense. You just call and say, oh, I'm just looking for Julie. And they go, oh, well, she's over at this other store. And then you found her.
Right. And so my job is, I'm out a lot, doing things and talking to people, but I'm also doing a lot of phone work, and I'm doing a lot of computer research. And, sometimes, and I, get hired to, sometimes do family backgrounds, like if on an estate or something, somebody died and we have to, by statute, alert all of the family members and we can't find them all. Can you find them? And so I'll have to build a little family tree and find these people. Just another, type of case that I would work on. And so there's a lot of computer work and a lot of research and sometimes, doing academic research on things, because I'm, looking up specific topics and looking up, knowing where to find information, knowing that the Consumer Product Safety Commission, keeps track of products and knowing how to research their databases and just finding out specifics. And my expertise is in providing information. And so I just use a lot of different sources, public and, through talking with people, and anything I can use, I will.
Mm-hmm. So do you have special software on your computer that's only allowed to investigators? I mean, is there something special on your computer?
Well, it's not software, but there are databases that are special for investigators.
And is there a process where you get to use those? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, there are databases that are made for investigators, but you have to prove they check you out very thoroughly and verify your license and make sure, you are using things. And then by law, you can only, get access to these databases for certain reasons. Like I don't have access. If I'm going to use these databases, I have to verify, and the databases make you do that you're using this for one of their permissible purposes. And so, I just can't have, hey, can you investigate my friend? I just want to know what's out there on her. I'm not going to do that.
No.
Yeah, because that is not a permissible purpose, and I could get my database taken away from me for doing something like that, and I would never do that.
Okay.
So it has to be a permissible purpose, which for me, it's always because I'm working for an attorney on a case.
Mm-hmm. So there are obviously, you're referencing licensure and you're referencing the ethics of your profession. So there's a licensure process that a private investigator goes through. Is there, like you said, what is that? Tell us, what's that process?
So that is, and that's kind of interesting, and you'll find this fact interesting, is so every state has their own professional licensing boards that you have to go through. Like doctors have to be licensed, lawyers have to be licensed, private investigators have to be licensed. But there are a handful of states, I think there's 6 of them, that do not require a private investigation license. And South Dakota is one of them.
Oh, okay. Good to know.
But those in Wisconsin, I have to be licensed, and my agency, my detective agency, has to be licensed. So I have a licensed private detective. I am a licensed private detective, and my agency is a licensed private detective agency. And so you have to have, in Wisconsin, you have to have the dual licensures. And that's how it is, quite frankly, in most states. Mm-hmm. And then we are only allowed to practice within our state, much like lawyers are only allowed to practice where they are, licensed.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
That's true for
licensed to
psychotherapists too.
practice.
That's true in my profession too, Deb. I'm licensed, and I am to practice only in the state of South Dakota. And if I move, I have to jump through all the hoops of another state in order to practice there.
It's same.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, and same here. Yep, same here. You'd have to do the same thing. And those of us, in the profession, advocate for that because it keeps the profession with a certain, so people have gone through some training where we've had to take a test to prove that we have some knowledge, that we're just not out trying to do this without being qualified to do so.
Right.
So those of us, so I mean, and that's the big thing. I mean, especially like in your profession, you wouldn't want unlicensed people out there who are just, I can do that. No, there's some skills I have here that,
Right.
If you're going to sell it to people, you have to,
Mm-hmm.
prove that you have these skills.
Mm-hmm. I'll bet there's a push in South Dakota to make that happen. We just haven't gotten there yet. So, and then there are ethics that go with that too, which I'm sure include confidentiality, anonymity, all kinds of things about respect, integrity, never misusing the information you have, because you find out some incredible things about people, and that needs to be guarded, protected.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's ethics, in terms of, I mean, the profession, and there's, just like there is with, other professions, the American Medical Association, the American Dental Association,
Right.
And there are several, most states also have a private investigation association, and there are several national and international investigation associations that people join.
Okay.
And those associations are always, providing education and promoting ethics and knowledge so people really can understand, understand the business and keep the profession at a good level.
Mm-hmm.
And the ethics are very important. I teach ethics in my class, which I think I failed to mention that earlier. I'm teaching a class at a community college here in Wisconsin on private investigation. And that is something I teach too, as we talk about the ethics. Mm-hmm. And keeping very honest in your profession. I mean, that's the two big common problems, for investigations are, misrepresentation, where, a private investigator misrepresents the truth or something and doesn't exactly report what was said or what they found. Right. And then also people having bias, including racial bias or other mm-hmm. types of bias that prevents them from doing their job mm-hmm. Professionally and accurately mm-hmm. and honestly. And so having a good basis and good ethics is very important in this job.
So I know that you teach the classes at the community college on investigation. And in that, when you and I spoke earlier, you mentioned something about helping the people who are there to study that, many of them in criminal justice or police science or something like that, in helping them understand how a case should be handled and examples of cases that were poorly handled. Could you give us an example of a case that was poorly handled?
One case that I teach about, and I like to teach about things that have been in the news and that people have heard about, and because they're public, and then there can be access to the information. And I remember, because I lived in South Dakota when the Jacob Wetterling abduction occurred. And I think that was in like 1989 to 1990 mm-hmm. Time frame. And So, and that case was just solved in the last few years.
Yeah.
And the problem with that case was, I mean, the people from that community worked so hard on that case, but it got such public attention from across the country that they kind of lost their focus. And instead of kind of following a protocol that you should follow when you're investigating a case and just doing some very specific things, they got distracted by the national attention, because then they're getting calls across the country that, oh, he was seen here, he was seen there, and they're, oh, we better check this out, we better check that out. And so they kind of lost focus and didn't do some of the basic things in the case that could have helped, I think, to solve it a little quicker. There is a podcast called In the Dark that kind of goes through that really well, and it's really interesting. And it kind of lays out how the investigation went awry, and things that were missed included, contacting, local municipalities, because back when that happened, the internet wasn't a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would have had to manually check other communities around there to see, well, have there been any other abductions or attempted abductions in different communities,
and they didn't do that, did they?
Police.
They didn't do that. They didn't check with the communities in the area, is what you're saying.
Right.
To see what else is going on. Have there been other abductions? Has there been any other activity? Right. They literally didn't check with the other communities in the area. Instead, they got lost in these national leads.
Yeah. And it started, they're so concentrated on looking for him that they're not looking for past, types of behavior. And it wasn't until there was a blogger who thought, I'm going to start looking into this and seeing, what else. And so I think she started pulling up newspaper articles and contacting other departments and found other similar type cases at that same time period. And so once she brought that to light, things started to roll for that case. So that was kind of a good example of,
so they missed the patterns that they missed the patterns that they should have been looking for. The patterns of behavior.
Exactly. And you should have, and I kind of teach, you have to have your protocol or your kind of your to-do list of, okay, what are all the things that have to be done here? And then it changes. Because you'll have, okay, I'm going to interview witness A, B, and C. Well, then when I interview witness B, they came up with 2 other names. So now I've got 2 more people to interview. And this person had this idea, and I better add that to the list. And so you have to have kind of a running to-do list and being able to modify and really recognize those things as they come up. So if somebody else mentions a witness, you have to, okay, I better put that one on my list. Or sometimes it's like, well, the context in which that person was mentioned that's not going to be important or the focus of my investigation, so I don't need to do that. So that's where some of the skill comes in recognizing what you need to do and following through on those items.
So part of what you're referencing too when you talk about the ethics is the importance of staying neutral, that you're not there to advocate for the client or to judge the client. You're simply there to gather evidence and information, and you try to do that with the least amount of bias that a human being can muster up. And you mentioned earlier when we spoke, and you mentioned it today, about sexual abuse accusations. So what is the process there when there's been a sexual abuse accusation and that person hires an attorney to defend them? Because I know you've worked on some cases like that.
Yes. And so I actually get hired on a lot of sexual assault cases. And I get hired on a lot of those because it's interesting. The sexual assault is like one of the few crimes where sometimes, if somebody's stabbed with a knife, that is always wrong. It is always wrong to stab somebody with a knife.
Mm-hmm.
It
I'll
is not
remember
always
that.
wrong to have a sexual relation with somebody, and and
Right.
so sexual assault cases are different because well, sometimes it's okay and sometimes it's not,
Right.
and so and obviously nobody advocates unconsensual sexual relations, and that's a lot of what I'm investigating. And so I will, talk to people surrounding this, and I'm just looking for the truth. What happened? And, did this happen? Is there a reason somebody would say this if it wasn't true? Why would that person say this if it wasn't true? Mm-hmm. And so you have to remain neutral, and I try and report exactly what the witnesses say and writing it down as fast as I can and typing it. I'm a quick typer, and just being very accurate in what happens. And sometimes there's these little details in cases that you don't think at the time are important, but later on it's like, oh, that was an important detail. I'm glad I wrote it down. And that happens so often to me, where all of a sudden this little detail would be like, oh, I needed to know, like, if she told that person this. Oh my God! Oh, I did have that written down. They did, and so that these little things can just kind of pop up and become very important facts in the case. Mm-hmm. And so it's just being objective and reporting. And I might have a personal feeling that or this person did it or didn't do it, but I have to really kind of leave that feeling to the side. And you never should put. I never put my impressions in the report. I put just the facts in my reports because that's all I can do. Yeah. What I think doesn't matter. What the judge and jury think is what matters.
So as you speak with witnesses, you might have a thought of your own that this guy's guilty. He did it, and you have to set that aside and continue to gather the information and not
right.
Not in any way taint. And so, like, can you think of one of those small, like, things somebody said, some little detail? I mean, I'm curious, what would that be that someone might say?
I mean, it could be something where somebody told somebody something and then later changed their story. And it could be, it can be things where, you say it, well, we had a good time last night to this person, and then to somebody else, you say, well, something awful happened. And
so you look for inconsistency. Over here, they're saying, I had a great time last night, and over here, they're saying, I was raped.
Right. And understand, nobody, when I'm representing somebody who may have done it, sending me out to interview people is not trying to get him off.
No.
So some people think that, boy, if they're out interviewing, they're trying to get him off. No, I'm trying to find the truth. Right. And if these people come back and say, this person, this person did it, this person did it, oh, he told me he did it, that's what I'm going to write down. And I'm not going to end up being his friend.
No.
Because if it is a guilty person, that's what I'm going to write down. So at times my investigation will not help the defendant in the case. And then it's up to the attorney to say, okay, now I know I need to negotiate this out. Mm-hmm. So hiring a private investigator, I mean, you're not advocating for that person and writing reports in a way to get them off. And that's actually something I have to teach in my class. And I ask my students that, would you work for somebody who you think is guilty of a sexual assault? And the initial reaction always is, well, no, I would never do that. Well, first of all, how do you know that they're guilty if you don't try? Right. I mean, there's a lot of wrongful convictions. And what would make you write something that would get him off if that's not what the facts are? Right. I mean, so
the important,
my investigation can supplement the police investigation if the person is guilty. Now,
Right.
we aren't turning that over. You don't turn that over to the police. It's their job to go and do their own investigation. But it will help the lawyer to know that, okay, I need to negotiate this out. I need to figure this out because this person, I don't have any helpful facts here. And there's nobody coming forward to say that. And it's not what I say because I'm just reporting what the witnesses will say. So the witnesses are the ones that are going to have to come to court to say it. So me changing the report doesn't help.
Right. And there's a safety in that for all of us in knowing that about the process, that you are pursuing the truth, and you're going to write down the actual information that you get, so that the legal case is based on that, not based on judgment, bias. And certainly we all read in the news, there's so much there, the news puts out all the judgment bias that in any number of cases that we read about. And so it's refreshing to hear someone say, no, I'm only in pursuit of the facts, only
Exactly.
what really the truth is, and staying as neutral as possible. Right. So sometimes, sometimes you're asked to investigate more mental health. You bump into some mental health issues. Like, what would be an example of that, Deb?
Well, one example, I've gotten calls from attorneys that, can you help me out? My client thinks that they're being stalked. And so I can talk to the client then and find out why they think that, and, what have you done to, do this, and, and sometimes, and it can be like situations like an ex-spouse, or they're going through a divorce, and the woman or the man could feel like the other person is stalking them. They've put something on my computer. They've got something on my phone. They're following me around, or somebody's following me around. But sometimes I have had a few of these cases where people call, and it's very obvious to me that they're not being stalked, that it's a mental health issue, that they're have a paranoid mental health issue. And I can tell that as I'm talking to them. And there's, when I start, offering solutions for this, and they won't go down that path whatsoever. They don't want to find a solution.
No, they're lost in the loop of that, aren't they?
Get a new phone.
Yeah.
Well, that won't help, because they'll just put it on the new phone. Well, they can't get it on the new phone. You give them the phone.
Don't give them your new phone. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. So if there's something like they don't want to find a solution, that can be a trigger in my brain. The other thing is if they're saying things that are just literally impossible. I got all new phones, and they put it on every one of my phones, and then I was in the shower, and I know they got pictures of me in the shower. Well, how did that possibly happen? Well, and then they can't really explain it. But they make up things that is not even possible. And so those kinds of things, so if they don't want to find help, and if they're making up things that are impossible, I have red flags going up in my mind and call the attorney, and I don't think I can help you on this. I think it's a mental health issue. And the attorney might have that kind of already in their mind, but they need to check with me to see if there's, just to make sure that they're making the right decision. So. Yeah. Wow. So in personal injury cases where there's been like a terrible injury or death, I'm assuming that you have to sit down with people and listen to what they have to say. And so you can put the case together and take a look at what all really happened in the accident, and then how to pursue whatever amount of money or vindication or validation for that client. What is it like for you to listen to people as they talk about these experiences? Because I'm sure you have to sit with the family and say, now tell me what happened. And I'm just wondering, like,
Yeah,
how do you take care of yourself as you listen to horrible stories like that?
yeah. It's difficult. It can be so heart wrenching to listen to what people have gone through,
Mm-hmm.
and it is very difficult sometimes. And I really have a hard time if it's something, like close to my own family situation or something where, and this has happened through the years where somebody will have lost a child and it's the same age as my child. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you just really, you know, feel for them and their pain. And so, but I try and use that. I always remain very professional, and I try and turn that into, okay, I'm going to work really hard on this case because that really irritates me that this happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so I try and turn it into a motivation, and I have a real motivation for justice.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it's not right, I will work and work and work until we get this figured out. And it's the same way with criminal defense cases where you get somebody who's been charged with something they didn't do. I mean, I am not going to let this go until this case is dismissed. I just have this passion for justice. And but on these cases, and it's very difficult for these people, but, going through this process can sometimes be healing. Like, you'll get some vindication, or you get some sum of money at the end for your loss. And I don't care what case it is. I don't care if it's a little rear-ender car accident or you've lost a spouse or a child or whatever. I have never had a client come back to me and say, well, that was worth it. Boy, I got this money. Boy, that was worth going through that pain.
No.
The clients will never, ever feel like they got enough.
No, because it doesn't bring the person
kind of
back. Yeah, it doesn't bring the person back. It doesn't bring, if they end up with a disability, it doesn't bring their ability back. It doesn't solve it. It doesn't heal it. But it's all we've got. It's all we've got to offer them.
That's exactly right. That's all we have to offer them. And I have learned through the years, it's not what happens to you, but it's how you deal with it. And so I have had clients who have lost a limb or become paralyzed. And okay, well, I got to deal with this. And they go and they learn how to deal with that. And they go back, okay, I learned to drive and I'm going back to work today.
And they go on with their lives.
Just deal with it. And they go on. And then I have other clients who get in, an accident and have a whiplash and are just incapacitated and can't do anything. And people have different levels of pain, and I'm not judgmental, but I do try and keep in mind, attitude and mental health. And just in dealing with these things, if you deal with them, that makes the difference. It's not what happens, but it's how you deal with it. Because we're all going to have bad things happen in our lives.
Yes.
But dealing with it is important in moving forward.
Sometimes I say to people with a major event, and it can be a horrible accident or crisis of some sort, that they are now in a position where you could swim up and go beyond where you've ever been, or you can go under. You can swim down. And, which way you're going to go. But your interpretation of the event itself creates your truth and your reality of it. And that is what you've observed with people, I'm sure. Yeah. So can you tell if people are lying? And how much do people lie?
Yeah, and I do teach a little bit about, signs of people lying, but I teach, there's no true way to tell. I mean,
Right.
there's just no way you can tell. And people react differently in different situations. And so what I kind of teach my students is just be aware of, I'll give you examples of these things, but don't judge them. Don't, because you don't know. So some things are, well, if you're talking to somebody and they're shifting in the chair a lot, they could be lying. Or if they're, their eyes are moving around, they could be lying. Or if they're, jittery, they could be lying. Well, how do you know they're not shifting position because their back hurts?
Right.
And I mean, you're seeing these people in a very, you're interviewing somebody for a very short amount of time. How do you know that this jittering isn't something they do all the time? There are people that, just kind of bounce their leg a lot,
That's right.
How do you know that isn't a normal habit? And then on top of that, keep in mind, you're interviewing them. And anytime you're interviewed, you're a little nervous about it. And so that can come out in various ways. One good example that I like to use is, and actually Malcolm Gladwell has this in his book, Talking to Strangers, and he talks about the Amanda Knox case.
Yes.
And she was the young lady in Italy who was imprisoned for murder because I think it was her roommate that got killed when she was over there. And she got arrested and I think she was found guilty of murder because of how she acted after it happened. So somebody made an interpretation on something she did after. Well, look, I think she's guilty because, boy, she's with her boyfriend, and I saw them kissing.
And
she must be guilty.
She did something weird, like she giggled and said something that they deemed inappropriate. Because I have listened to that book, and I've studied that case because I thought, what an interesting psychological study. But she had some just inappropriate responses to things, but that didn't mean she was guilty. And I go back to that whole thing that we just talked about the investigator staying neutral, because you don't say, anybody who does that is guilty. No, you do not. That's
right.
Anybody could get accused of something, and you certainly, because you had a moment of some inappropriate thing you said, or you joked inappropriately or whatever, which is what Amanda Knox did, and then she was completely convicted on the international level for what she did. Yeah. That's an incredible book, Talking to Strangers. Really good book.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Right. But he talks about that case, and he's so right. You can't be judging people, and and that's how. That's a lot how these false confessions come in, where people are they're pushed into saying something that they didn't really mean, and so there's a lot of people convicted on false confessions, and they're pressured to say something that isn't even true, and so you really have to look at the facts and the evidence in addition to looking at what the person is saying or doing, and you can't make judgments on just looking at somebody without evidence. That's when the personal bias comes in and things like that.
Because there are gender differences, there are racial differences, there are age differences. I've had people say, well, a child's parent has died and they're at the funeral, and the kids are, kind of skipping around. Maybe they're 4 or 5 years old. And they'll judge that as, oh, look at that. I go, no, they're kids. They can't even begin to grasp where they are. They don't know. And people will get judgmental of something like that, misinterpreting what's happening. So, yeah. But I think people do lie quite a bit, don't they?
They do. And I've seen it in, reading depositions, or I've attended many depositions, watching people, and there is a lot of lying going on, but the whole justice process is based on truth, and if everybody just shows the truth, the system would work really well, and so that's what I strive to do, is just keep truth out there.
So you love what you do. What do you love most about it, Deb? I think you just said it. You love to find the truth, don't you? That's your that.
I love. Yeah, it's to find the truth, and for me, it's the justice. Making sure that if somebody was wronged, or if or if just to make sure that that everything is done right. For me, like the best of the best is like I got word this week that a criminal defense case I was working on got dismissed after my investigation because they had the wrong person convicted of the crime, or they are charged with the crime. So this person is facing years in prison. And I did my investigation. I'm like, they had the wrong person, and so I don't write, you have the wrong person. I just write all the all the reports and what all the witnesses have said and what's going on. And then I got word this week that that case was dismissed.
And that is really satisfying.
Because I changed that person's life.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
So that's the best for me. Yeah.
So Deb, how do you take care of yourself? I mean, I know that you were one of the most disciplined people I know in terms of your physical activity. You exercise, and I mean, talk a little bit about how you take care of yourself, Deb.
Well, I just know I work better when my head is clear and when I feel good. And for everybody, physical health and mental health have to come first. And so I do take care of myself, and I will have so much to do that I'm going to go to the Y, because if I go to the Y, I will be much more productive in getting things done than if I do not. And because I think if your head is clear and I just think you are able to process things better and work better. And so I think it's just important to take care of yourself.
Right.
And not be.
So what do you do, Deb, to take care of yourself? Like, tell us what you do. And you work out every day, don't you?
I try and do something every day, whether it's, I'm a longtime member of the YMCA, and I don't go to the YMCA every day, but I go often, a few times a week, and I'm biking. Occasionally I'll do a little, run. I'm doing different classes, whether it be yoga classes or Pilates or whatever. And then, of course, I'm taking the dog for a walk as often as I can. I love that. I mean, just even being outside helps. And so, I think just keeping active is important, because it just helps keep your head, clear. And when I do those things, I come back and I'm like, oh, okay, I can tackle this now. I have a lot to do, and I got a big case in front of me, but I can tackle this, and I can do this because my head is clear.
Yeah, you use, from what I've observed and knowing you for so long, you use your exercise in a way of meditation for your mind, where you allow it to truly relax your mind. So that, because in my belief about the use of exercise with that, is that what I like to do is to exercise on a level where if I attempt to do a simple math problem in my head, I can't do it, because I can't think like that. And I think, perfect, now I have, quote, lost my mind. Because otherwise, having a heavily analytical mind such as yours or like mine can kind of drive you a little bit nuts. I can get lost in my head. And I need to do things that take me out of that. And then when I return, I'm better. I can think even more clearly. And it sounds like that's your experience too.
Exactly. It just helps clear your mind.
So, last thoughts, Deb, before we stop. What's your advice to someone who's considering this line of work? Do you have some advice?
Yeah, well, I do. Nobody goes into this line of work without a prior background. And like you said, you don't go into school and major in private investigation, and then you go out and get a job. I know, well, in big cities, there's bigger, private investigation firms that, might hire somebody, out of school. But most of us, don't live in the big city. And most private investigation firms are like mine, where it's just like a single person or a couple people, working in it. And my advice is, you have to do something to get those skills. So, a lot of, private investigators, are ex-police, detectives. I know some ex-FBI people that went into private investigation. People who've worked in the insurance, industry doing investigations can go out. There's people like me who came up through academics and through working in a law firm. That's how I did it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's tough. It's tough to make a living at it if you don't have that background, because who's going to hire you? You're selling a service, and so you have to have the background and knowledge in order to do that service. Mm-hmm. And so you have to start somewhere else first and get, and then kind of move into it, is what I have observed in the industry. Mm-hmm. And I always encourage people to follow your passion, because that's all I did, is I followed my passion. Mm-hmm. And in order to do this, I worked hard. I went to school, got a master's degree, so I got a lot of knowledge in how to investigate cases and how to do research. I learned to research in graduate school, and so I researched things very well. I know how to do that, and then couple that with the law firm experience. It worked really well for me. But a lot of, there's a lot of different types of investigators too. Some people, OSHA has investigators. There's, financial investigators. There's insurance investigators. There's a lot of different investigative type jobs around. And you have to do something before you start your own business like that.
Yep. So you have to be willing to take the time to acquire the seasoning and life experience that you need before you can become good at this. You're not just going to jump out and know how to do it. You really need seasoning. And life experience. Right. I don't know. Like you hung out with lawyers and took in how they think, how they view things. But you've also spent time with the police, and you see how they approach things. The FBI, they have their own investigative approach, and kind of bringing all of those things together in your mind, along with the academics, which is important, because knowing how to research is a crucial piece, I would think, to doing any kind of work like this. So, wow.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. And there's so much to know, like in my specific specialty of, working for lawyers and, civil litigation and criminal defense. I have to know the laws, and I have to know what evidence, how can you get evidence into court? Because it doesn't do any good to be doing a bunch of stuff that the lawyer can't use. Right. That's no good. Yeah. So I have to know what evidence is admissible in court. I have to know what laws are out there. What is, what are the general things to look for when you're investigating a case? There's a lot to know.
Yep. So, last thoughts before we stop, Deb? This was great.
This was great, Mary. I'm so honored that you asked me to do this, and it's been a joy to just talk with you. We don't usually talk about things like this, so this is very fun.
That's true. I've learned a lot about what you do, even though I've known you for years, and we've certainly referenced it before. But this was great fun, Deb. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Mary.
And so, to my listeners, I hope you enjoyed our episode today, and I will be back probably in the next month or so with the next episode of Unscripted Let's Talk. And until then, remember to live your life with passion, purpose, and intention. Until next time.